We used to think, for instance, that you can't travel faster than the speed of light. We know that that's not true anymore. There have been experiments done by Alan Spector, as a French physicist, showing that you can have teleportation. You've got entangled particles that are communicating with each other at 1 billion times the speed of light, 10 to the power of 9 times c. So we know that the speed of light isn't the upper limit. You can go billions of times faster than the speed of light. So in fact, is an advanced person or an advanced individual like a Jesus somebody who can take what we do in 9 months and speed it up so fast that he could create and manifest a physical body, a full-grown, mature, adult physical body, just like that, and then dissolve it just like that, and remanifest it elsewhere just like that, or bilocate and make two versions of himself instantaneously in different locations. It's not even science fiction anymore. It's really, really possible. So is that what he's about? And when we celebrate Eucharist, when we take the host and the wine later and we say, this is my body, and we have our own words here, the body which I accepted at my incarnation. In fact, is it an effort through a shifting of consciousness and mindsets that we're shifting out of time, that we've learned how to master time, he's teaching us how to master time, and that we're having real encounters. Not just with the Jesus who appeared as the Nazarene 2,000 years ago, but the entity, the extraordinary advanced entity, who's been on the planet many times before that, has been here since, and will be here again. Are we having encounters with that level of intelligence? So who is Jesus Christ for you then? Is he still this pristine, only Son of God? Is he an extraterrestrial? Is he an avatar? You think about that today. What does he mean to you? This brings me to my third point. I'm going to talk about Project Earth. And I'm going to make 4 sub-points here, just to confuse you. I'm going to talk about ancient life. I'm going to talk about ancient gods. I'm going to talk about modern gods. And I'm going to talk about future gods. So here's the first sub-point. So where did life come from, planet Earth? Planet Earth is about 4.6 billion years of age. Life didn't begin to emerge until about 3.7 billion years ago. So where did this life come from? Well, there are many theories. One is that there's some kind of spontaneous combustion. Some kind of primordial soup just birthed life. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Another theory is that we got bombarded by meteorites, and that these meteorites came from other parts of space where life had already emerged, and so there was some kind of bacteria or some atoms embedded, and when they crashed into planet Earth, they germinated life here. The Sumerians, which is the oldest civilization on the planet, it goes back to 3,800 BC. They have a theory, and it's in their writings. They've left lots of artifacts in their wake. And their belief system was that before Earth existed, there was a planet called Tiamat, located where the asteroid belt is at the moment. And that there was a planet came through, a planet they named Nibiru. And it came through, and there was a crash between the moons of this planet. It came in with 9 moons. And they crashed and they bombarded Tiamat. And then they smashed it into 2 pieces. One piece became the asteroid belt, and the other part got jettisoned into a different orbit and became planet Earth. And that Nibiru had life on it, and it seeded planet Earth. That was the teaching of the Sumerians 6,000 years ago. No less a character than Francis Crick, one of the co-discoverer of DNA. In 1973, he was interviewed, and he talked about a theory that's called Panspermia, that life on planet Earth came from outside the planet itself. And he was asked in an interview, how could spores travel through intergalactic space and manage to survive and land on planet Earth? And he gave an answer that astounded the interviewer. This is Sir Francis Crick. He said, these spores came down in a specially designed space capsule. Figure that one out. So who sent that one? This is Francis Crick. So how did life begin on this little planet of ours? Is it in fact possible that given that life had emerged 10 billion years earlier elsewhere, that planet Earth is in fact a little garden project? That some group of extraterrestrials found this little green-blue jewel and figured out it'd be a nice little garden, and they came down here and they planted a garden. And over the course of millennia, they've come back and they've weeded it, and they've watered it, and they've nurtured it. Is that possible? So in fact, are we just a life form that has been bred by a very, very advanced civilization from elsewhere? Again, the Sumerians, this is their teaching. The Sumerians have lots of teaching talking about a group of extraterrestrials that they call the Anunnaki, whom they believe visited planet Earth 445,000 years ago. They brought animal husbandry and plant husbandry with them at some stage, and they genetically modified some really primitive hominids and created Homo sapiens and eventually Homo sapiens sapiens. And this story gets into the Bible as the story that God created us in his own image. He created us, male and female, he created us. There are actual protocols in the Sumerian writings where they talk about how the Anunnaki literally harvested eggs from hominid women, cross-fertilized it with seed from their own males, and then implanted their own women and delivered them by caesarean section in order to create a workforce for themselves. And they called them Adam. The first one they called Adam. So is it possible that even Homo sapiens sapiens itself is the result of a garden tending by some kind of a really advanced society long, long before us? And that because we have some kind of a race memory of this event, all religions talk about gods that come from the skies. Now there's a very interesting phenomenon called cargo cults. I don't know, have you come across that notion? Cargo cults is the reality that when a technologically sophisticated society encounters a technologically primitive society and lives among them for a period of time and brings all of their kinds of gifts and their technology and then subsequently leaves, the primitive societies turn them into gods. And they begin worship and they offer them sacrifice, hoping to entice them back with more gifts. And this has happened in the entire civilization of the planet, and it happened particularly in Polynesia and the South Pacific just before and during World War II. The Japanese and the Americans landed on on islands that previously hadn't seen civilized human beings. And these natives were fascinated by the technology that the Japanese and the Americans brought. Totally fascinated. And when they finally left at the end of World War II, these people created what are now called the cargo cults, religions that began to worship those people who had just left and had brought all of these kind of technology. And you go back to these islands today, and they have made really crude imitations of landing strips and aeroplanes and radio antennae. And they have rituals around these things, hoping to entice the gods to come back to give them more of the cargo. That's why they're called cargo cults, because these people gave them a whole bunch of sophisticated gifts. And they're all over the planet. And in fact, when you read the history of the evolution of civilization, every single mythology has these kinds of stories. You find it in the Sumerians, which is the oldest group. You find it in the Babylonian mythology. You find it in the Assyrians. You find it in the Canaanites. You find it in the Hittites. You find it in the Egyptians. You find it in the Greeks. You find it in the Romans. You find it in the Aztecs. You find it in the Mayan. You find it in the Dogon of West Africa. All of these mythologies contain stories about sky gods who came down, created us, and gave us a whole bunch of gifts, and we got to offer them sacrifice in order to bring them back again. So there would be they'd be the ancient gods. Now what a modern version of that be like? When we exploded our first new atomic device in 1945 and subsequently used it in Hiroshima, around the same time, a little bit previously, we had developed rocketry, which would allow us to escape from the planet for the very first time ever. We could send stuff outside of our own planet for the first time. Interesting, at this stage, there was a huge increase in the reports of unidentified flying objects, particularly around nuclear installations. Many, many well-verified accounts that occasionally some kind of a UFO appeared and it literally shut down the silos, that the firing mechanisms for the intercontinental ballistic missiles literally were deactivated for several hours at a time. No explanation given. Now, is it possible that these people who created the garden and have been tending it and watering it and weeding it and genetically modifying some of the species, including ourselves, is it possible that at some stage they came down because they're now concerned about developments here? Something is going wrong in the garden. So are they our angel guardians who are trying to protect us from ourselves? Are they interested more in their garden than they are in us? And there's a species of life, there's a weed developing now that's threatening to destroy the whole garden, or some kind of bugs who are going to eat all the plants and they're not going to let it happen. So is that what's happening here? Are they trying to protect us? Are they trying to police us? Are they trying to say, okay, you know, you can mess up this little garden, but now that you've developed the technology to get off your own planet, you're not going to import that kind of stuff out into the solar system or out into the brotherhood of the galaxy. So no, it's not going to happen. We're not going to allow that to happen. Is that what they're doing? Or is the possibility that actually these guardians of ours are here to usher us in to Christ consciousness, which is my last sub-point? Is that why they're here? Is it not so much about that they're, you know, protecting us from ourselves or policing us, or that they're kind of taking possession of their garden once more, but that this experiment that they've overseen on behalf of God, that they're now inviting us to a stage where we make the shift into Christ consciousness, that this is our journey. And if that's so, who then is Jesus? Is Jesus an avatar? Is he an extraterrestrial? Or in fact, is he a human being from our own future? Imagine a situation, a bifurcation point that happens frequently. According to, you know, modern physics, John Wheeler and Hugh Everett came up with the notion in the 1950s of parallel universes, that there are parallel possibilities, that when you come to a bifurcation point, a huge decision, you take A and B. So Yogi Berra was right. When you come to a crossroads, take it, both parts of it. So is it possible that the human species has reached a bifurcation point where we've spun off two parallel universes, one of which has made the shift into Christ consciousness, and the other one which didn't, and is in danger of destroying itself? And this group that has moved on into a totally advanced civilization, a Christ-conscious civilization, is now time traveling and is coming back to try to influence the other universe so that this universe as well gets redeemed, that the entire universe gets redeemed, this parallel universe, so that those of us who are inclined to go down the path of self-destruction and global annihilation, that we're being offered another alternative. That a being from our own future, a Christ figure, has come back to lead the second level, the second universe, into the path of Christ consciousness as well. And that this is the function of Jesus. That Jesus came down to set this process in motion, to invite us into a realization that we can make it from type 0 to type 1, and that we can become Christ-conscious human beings. In conclusion, let me say this. I believe that we live in an L-shaped cosmos. In fact, a 4L-shaped cosmos. And the 4 L's of the cosmos are love, light, life, and laughter. And what do I mean by those? I am totally convinced that the core energy of source, the core energy emanating from source, is pure, unconditional love. I'm convinced that light, as we understand it, is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit, or light, is the medium guiding the evolutionary trajectory. And that life is the dance that happens when love meets light. And that laughter is the only valid response for any species that becomes self-aware and witnesses the dance between love and light. The only response is laughter. And I don't mean laughter as in cynical laughter or mocking or self-righteous laughter. I mean the utter sanctity of the realization and the utter wonder that grips us when you see love dancing with light. The only valid response is to laugh.